I suppose I was your typical teenager. I could sleep away the day and stay up all night. And like most girls, when I did sleep, I dreamed of one day finding my shining prince. I just never imagined I'd come face to face with the Prince of Darkness. I was named after my mom, Rose, but everyone called me Rosie. I was the only girl in the family, their perfect little angel.
Rosie liked to help people. She'd give her last dollar to the guy with a sign, "I'll work for food."
I couldn't help myself. Even if others couldn't see it, I thought everyone had a little good in them. I just knew it.
In her Bible, she'd have prayer requests for people that needed help, emotionally, spiritually.
Maybe that's why, when it came to dating, I always went for the bad boys.
I think my sister attracted the bad boys only because she thought she could change them. She always looked for the good in somebody.
I liked the late night crowds where I would find the boys I was sure I could turn from bad to good.
Rose is definitely one of those girls that like to stay out with her friends. She just liked the nightlife, I guess.
But what started out as a typical Friday night turned into a nightmare no one will ever forget.
I was working up the street, and Rosie came in. She was walking, and she was telling me she was going to her friend's house.
Mom sometimes worried about me walking alone, especially at night, but she raised me to take care of myself.
Rosie was quite independent. She was 5'2". She thought she was 6'5", you know. I asked her to go home and get the van. And she just sort of laughed at me, and as she walked out the door, I said, "Rosie," and she turned around and I said, "I love you." And she said, "I love you too, Mom."
When you never worry about trouble finding you, it's almost impossible to see it coming.
My mom came home from work, and she didn't hear from Rose. We knew something was wrong.
I was 18, so sometimes I'd stay out all night.
The following day, I called her work, and she had a no-call, no-show, which was not like Rosie. So we went to the police and reported her missing.
Rosie's mother was very adamant that something bad had happened to her daughter, right from the very start. We took some preliminary information down. However, we didn't have anything to investigate at that point. She had been missing for 24 hours.
No matter where I went, I always tried to call home so no one would worry. For Mom, that was the dead giveaway that something was wrong.
People want to believe that an 18-year-old just ran away. But we all knew our Rosie girl was gone. So my son and I went home and we made up our own flyers. And we started distributing around town.
Every time you just look down thinking about, is there a piece of clothing? Do you see something out of place? And as a family, we were an emotional roller coaster.
When you have a missing person case, everything is circumstantial.
What you have to look at first is, who were they with last, or do you know who they were with? I went to where she would hang out. I went to certain areas where she had friends, and the two names that came up almost every single time was John Kehoe and Billy Brown.
Billy and me grew up together. We were about as close as a girl and boy could get, but still be just friends. But John, I would have died to be his girl. I just never could tie him down.
John Kehoe came off as a very suave kind of guy, but aren't all young kids trying to be somebody?
John may have been the cool one, but Billy was the good guy, the one I could always count on.
I had gone to the Billy Brown residence and spoke with Billy Brown's brother. And he said that his brother Billy and John Keogh had gone to Florida.
It's not a crime to go looking for a little son, unless you got something horrible to hide. My mom used to laugh at me because I always had to have my hair and makeup just right.
Her girly girl side was her red lipstick. She loved her red lipstick.
I used my reflection every chance I got for a quick touch-up. But now, seeing my face in every store window didn't exactly give me the same satisfaction.
I did what I had to do, and that was to find Rosie and to keep my boys emotionally stable.
I don't know how my mother was able to manage. And when she wasn't working, she was searching.
And suddenly everyone was searching for my pals Billy and John.
About the time of Rosie's disappearance, we heard that Billy and John Keogh had gone to Florida. Close maybe 3 to 4 weeks later, Billy comes back into town, and I get a call from Billy's mother that her son would talk to me.
Billy always told it like it was. I liked that about him.
Billy says, yes, she was at my house that night, and at that point, she left.
That night, Billy invited me to a party. I knew John was going to be there, and I always jumped at the chance to hang out with him. What girl wouldn't?
I asked Billy, I says, do you know where Rosie's at? And he says, no, I don't know. I asked him where John was at, and he says, I came back and he went out to Texas.
John was kind of a free spirit, and if he didn't want to be found, chances are you weren't going to find him.
I said, well, can you have him call me? I'd like to talk with John. But I never heard from John Keogh.
I knew better than anyone. John never called people back. He just couldn't be bothered.
And pretty much the story that I had heard that he had gone to Florida and out to Texas seemed to be true. I had no physical evidence to tie either Billy or John Keogh to her disappearance. I didn't have a body, I had no crime scene, I had really nothing.
It was obvious we had to move on to other persons of interest.
I always tried my best to help anyone I could. And it turns out there are plenty of others who do the same.
We're probably talking maybe a month now in the investigation. Some tips were starting to come in. We got the local news media involved. We searched endlessly. I mean, everywhere from backyards, trash bins, riverbeds, behind buildings. I took it personally to a point because I wanted to solve the case.
My mom's priority during this time was to find my sister, good, bad, or indifferent. That was #1 priority.
Probably several hundred tips came in, but none of these leads proved anything. I was getting very frustrated because nothing was panning out, and it got to the point where it was becoming a cold case.
I was afraid nobody else would look for Rose.
Detective John Cawley felt like he had nowhere to go, and my mom said, you're not going to stop. You're not going to give up.
Hoping I might still come home, my family left my room just as it was, in the care of my dolls. Guess I was a little old for them, but something about them always made me feel safe. But that was then.
About 5 months into the investigation, a call came in, and we received information that Rosie's body may possibly be in a gravel pit outside of Lansing.
Some kids used to like to party at the gravel pit, but the place always gave me the creeps.
They had Lansing Search and Rescue to Michigan State Police out there with boats, divers, dogs.
The dogs started barking, and everything went just dead silent. The dive team then started doing their dives into the water, looking for Rosie.
Suddenly, my family realized I might finally be coming home, just not the way they had hoped I would.
You thought for sure they were going to pull something up.
I felt, oh man, this is it. We're going to get something. But when Rosie's mother saw the article of clothing, she said to me, that's not Rosie.
And that was my sign from Rosie that she wasn't there.
And finally, the lieutenant walked over and said that, you know, we're not finding anything here. And at that point, I just felt like, what? We have nothing. I looked at Rosie's mother and said, I don't know what else to do.
I don't know what told me that there was no body. It just, something in me said I probably will never see her body again.
I was still missing, but my family could see me every time they passed my room.
You always had to look at her room. It was empty. It was quiet. You know, there's moments where I used to go and look under her bed like she was hiding from us for a year.
It was like my life was frozen in time. But one day that changed, when the California sun shed some new light onto my disappearance.
In Los Angeles, California, there was a suspect that had been arrested on a homicide there. And we believed at that time that he was a serial killer. We learned that he had some direct contact here in Lansing, Michigan.
Had I crossed paths with the worst bad boy of them all? I always felt my place in this world was to help those who needed it most. But as it turned out, I was the one who needed help in the worst way.
Rosie wasn't gone, I don't think, 2 years before Charles Rathburn had been accused of killing a model in California.
This suspect was a photographer, and his MO was taking pictures of his victims. He preyed upon pretty women in hopes that they could possibly make a career out of modeling or acting.
And it looks like this creep came to the Midwest looking for the next big thing.
He had a mailing address of a trailer park just in the south border of Lansing. His address was very close to Rose Larner's. It was within a mile. We thought we had finally found our man.
It just made me scared. I try to teach my kids not to be afraid of a lot of things. I think in the long run, Rosie might have been a little naive about people.
We had officers and detectives check out that address that Rathburn used here locally, and we weren't able to develop any leads.
But photographers, especially creepy ones, like to keep mementos of their work close by, and this guy was no different.
We had learned that this person, during a search of his home in Los Angeles, California, had many photographs of different females, and so we sent photographs of Rose Larner out to them to possibly see if there was a connection there between him and Rose Larner.
A picture might be worth 1,000 words, but mine weren't adding up to much.
The investigators in California had received our photographs that we sent to them, and unfortunately there was no match. So Charles Rathburn was eliminated as a suspect in the case of Rose Larner. We're just at another dead end.
Nobody wanted me to be the victim of a serial killer, but it was killing everyone not knowing what happened to me.
There wasn't a day of closure at that point. It just went on forever.
After I met with Rose's mother and spent some time getting updated with her, the first thing I want to do is get back with the Lansing Police Department to be updated on the latest that they had.
Sometimes, when you're too close to a picture, you can't focus on the details. But when you take a step back, you see what's been in front of you all along.
When I talked to Detective Brooks, I told him that go back and take a look at John Keogh and especially Billy Brown. There's something there.
Billy and I grew up together. I always thought we'd be friends forever.
Going back with Billy, he told me that him and John Keogh went to Florida right after they had seen Rose Larner, and they had no idea what happened to her. In the process, Billy was talking about he and John Kehoe and a guy named Sam Mears were stopped by the police down in near Orlando one night.
Billy didn't know it at the time, but he may have just given those cops the clue they needed to finally catch my killer.
So I went to locate Sam Mears in Florida, actually, and found he was in prison down there serving for armed robbery.
I had no idea who this guy Sam was, but it turns out he knew a lot about me.
During the interview with Sam sitting there, I know nothing. I don't know anything about that. I challenged Sam that he was not being truthful with us. I recall Sam Mears putting his elbows on the table, resting his head in his hands, and he began to sob.
Carrying around a secret will eventually eat you up. The worst ones can even kill you. I always thought a girl could never have too many friends. But I guess when you've got the wrong friends, even one is too many.
During the interview, Sam Mears began to cry, and he shared with us the first night that he met with Brown and Kehoe right after they arrived in Florida. He picked him up at a bus station. They took him to a hotel. They did cocaine, marijuana, and they're drinking.
John never could hold his liquor or a secret.
And out of nowhere, John Kehoe began to brag about the girl they killed in Michigan named Rose and how they did it. This gave us ammunition that was going to be crucial for us when we go to interview John Kehoe and Bill Browning.
But if investigators were going to talk to Billy and John, they had to find him first.
Kehoe had moved on. We heard Mexico, we heard Texas.
But Billy was hiding out closer to home, and he was running scared.
We're asking some of his friends and relatives very pointed questions, and obviously that's gotten back to Billy Brown, and he knows it's just a matter of time.
The Billy I knew was long gone, but maybe there was a shred of good still left in him.
Much to my surprise, Bill Brown came in with his attorney. Basically was, look, I know it looks like I killed her, but I didn't. I'm going to tell you what I know, what I saw.
Billy could never do anything to hurt me, but what I'll never understand is how he could let someone else do that.
During the confession with Bill Brown, he told us that John Kehoe killed Rose Larner.
I liked John so much and had plans for us to be together. But John had a plan all his own.
John Kehoe and Bill Brown picked up Rose Larner that night.
John's grandparents were away, and he promised we'd have some fun at their house.
And while they're at that house, they drank, partied down, and next morning, Rose was showering, and John Kehoe came up from behind Rose with a cord and put her around her neck.
I just wanted John to like me, but he didn't. In fact, he wanted me gone from his life, for good.
Billy Brown knew that John Kehoe had enough of Rose Larner. She was hounding him, and he thought maybe this was something that was just going to scare her.
John wanted to scare me, all right. Scare me to death.
But much to Billy's surprise, she collapsed. And John Kehoe brought a knife in the room and began carving on Rose.
Billy always did follow John's lead, and that morning was no different.
They started a big bonfire in the pit. They put Rose's remains in this pit and burned her up. And they put her remains into some bags and drove around the state, dumping the remains out as they went down the road.
Billy Brown betrayed Rosie's trust. He was a coward, and he knows Rosie would have taken a bullet for him, because that's what kind of friend she was.
2.5 years after she was killed, we went to the house and executed a search warrant. The crime lab located one speck of blood in the hallway outside the bathroom. With that small amount of blood, they were able to identify it as being Rose's.
that was about all they found of me. But it was enough to make sure John got what was coming to him.
We learned that John Kehoe was in Mexico. So with the help of some of the Mexican police down there, we were able to arrest John Kehoe, surprise him in a bar. I called Rose from the border down there.
He said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "You got him." He said, "We got him."
John Kehoe never confessed his involvement in the case. He denied it all along. But Bill Brown testified. The crime lab's testimony was remarkable. And we didn't need John Kehoe. The jury did their job.
Rosie believed there was something good in everybody. I guess we all believed that way until we found out there is true evil.
I had so much living left to do, so many things left unsaid, all because one man needed his space. Well, I hope this is what he had in mind. I suppose I was your typical teenager. I could sleep away the day and stay up all night. And like most girls, when I did sleep, I dreamed of one day finding my shining prince. I just never imagined I'd come face to face with the Prince of Darkness. I was named after my mom, Rose, but everyone called me Rosie. I was the only girl in the family, their perfect little angel.
Rosie liked to help people. She'd give her last dollar to the guy with his sign, "I'll work for food."
I couldn't help myself. Even if others couldn't see it, I thought everyone had a little good in them. I just knew it.
In her Bible, she'd have prayer requests for people that needed help, emotionally, spiritually.
Maybe that's why, when it came to dating, I always went for the bad boys.
I think my sister attracted the bad boys only because she thought she could change them. She always looked for the good in somebody.
I liked the late night crowds where I would find the boys I was sure I could turn from bad to good.
Rose is definitely one of those girls that like to stay out with her friends. She just liked the nightlife, I guess.
But what started out as a typical Friday night turned into a nightmare no one will ever forget.
I was working up the street and Rosie came in. She was walking. And she was telling me she was going to her friend's house.
Mom sometimes worried about me walking alone, especially at night, but she raised me to take care of myself.
Rosie was quite independent. She was 5'2". She thought she was 6'5", you know. I asked her to go home and get the van. And she just sort of laughed at me, and as she walked out the door, I said, "Rosie," and she turned around and I said, "I love you." And she said, "I love you too, Mom."
When you never worry about trouble finding you, it's almost impossible to see it coming.
My mom came home from work, and she didn't hear from Rose. We knew something was wrong.
I was 18, so sometimes I'd stay out all night.
The following day, I called her work, and she had a no-call, no-show, which was not like Rosie. So we went to the police and reported her missing.
Rosie's mother was very